All right, I wanted to talk about mufflers a little bit here. Just like the other videos, this is meant to be an individual aspect leading to a larger whole that I'm going to cover in both a video on blueprinting and in my proper reply to Mr. Iron Horse's very awesome, very thorough reply to me. Um, so this is some thoughts on exhausts and some food for thought, some modifications that I do, some things to some things to do if you would like to gain power and make your saw run better, run cooler, have more power, etc. I'm only interested in what would be considered good gains on a saw. I'm not interested in cranking up speed beyond anything anywhere past, say, 3,200 feet per second on the piston, which I believe is about 11.8 or low 12,000 RPMs on a 660. Not interested in compression over 175, 200 at the plug, or in a ratio over, say, 11:1. I'm interested in good power. I'm interested in blueprinting an engine, especially a big board engine. So let's get to it. The muffler. The muffler is, the exhaust system of a saw is going to be very different than on a regular two-stroke engine. A regular two-stroke performance engine is going to have what's called an expansion chamber exhaust system. And that's going to be a pipe that comes off of your cylinder. The cylinder right here is on its side with the muffler sitting on top of it. If you can't see that clearly, that's the base of the cylinder. That's the top of it, the combustion chamber. That's the exhaust side. That's a muffler heat shield, and that's the muffler itself. Okay, so I have a separate video that covers these guys here, the grunt gaskets, or the header pipes, or the lead-in pipes. They're one part of an expansion chamber pipe design that we actually can use on our outdoor power equipment without having to have some goofy, unrealistic pipe attached to it that makes it so it's no longer outdoor power equipment, but some, silly science fair project. At any rate, I see two massive shortcomings with mufflers, and they're being addressed more and more. But they can both still be taken. You can take them to much more extremes yourself, just by altering some things. The first one's going to be the size of the or let's call the first one the poor slash zero regard for sonic pulsing. Whenever the exhaust cracks and sends the exhaust pulse into the muffler, into the exhaust system, the muffler can itself is going to go under pressure, significantly high pressure, like nearly 10 psi, probably a bit over 7 psi maybe. And the cylinder, the top end of the cylinder itself, above the piston, is going to come down near enough to atmosphere. You're still going to have a bit of pressure when your transfer's open. True blowdown or optimal blowdown would not be zero pressure. You would run into a little fallow period before the transfer's cracked. That's not how. There's not enough room. Frankly, there's not enough room for the ports. You have to have a little bit of pressure still being relieved as the transfers are cracked. It's impossible to get it dead on, but you want the pressure to be as low as possible when those transfers crack, and that's what satisfactory blowdown would be. So, anyways, the grunt gaskets are able to aid us with better, quicker blowdown. But there's other things that aid us with that. Number one is getting rid of the ill-matched gaskets that are almost always going to come with your saw. You're going to put it between... you're going to take one of these cheap little gaskets they give you, you put it between your cylinder and your muffler, you look through and you see that it's a lip, it's a protruding lip. That kind of thing... It's not even about it's choking off flow, because we're probably talking about, 5 thousandths or 10 thousandths of an inch. It's about disrupting it's not about the throughput, the volume of gas that's getting through it. It's about disrupting its flow. And when you're talking about the actual exit pipe, whether it's just the port or whether it's the port plus a header or a lead-in or a grunt gasket, you want that to be able to spit out, and you want it to spit through a diverging angled. You want its walls to diverge so that it's creating a suction for you want its walls to diverge for two reasons. And you want it to be of some length that's greater than 0.8 inches, which is what one of these ports are. And it's for two reasons. Number one is because that 2-inch long or 1-inch long diverging exhaust tract before it dumps into that can, that's going to create suction, which is going to help aiding more. It's going to let you achieve depressurization of the cylinder with less degrees of crankshaft rotation. However, it's also, and it'll be the longer of a tube that you use. If you're able to achieve something where you have a taper that's 3-to-1. The surface area of the exit of the header is 3 times the area of the entrance. That all but negates the impact of a sonic return wave. And you could achieve that without sticking your muffler off the front of your crankcase if you had the ability to easily machine a grunt gasket that was going to be 1-inch separation between the can and the jug, and then enter the muffler for another 2 inches, and then empty into the muffler here. And that will reduce the internal volume of the muffler just a touch, obviously, but it's increasing the volume of the exhaust tract. So that's really kind of 6 or half a dozen, because at the end of the day, it's all volume for that exhaust charge to dump into when you're cracking the pressurized cylinder open via the piston opening the exhaust port. So. Some other considerations. Seals. Seals matter when it comes to your flange and muffler mating up. One thing to note is that the back of these mufflers are almost never flat. You're going to want to take it against something and make it flat, just like glass with sandpaper. A piece of sandpaper with glass beneath it, so that you can ensure that the back of the muffler is dead flat. Same for that heat shield, both sides of it, so that you can be sure that everything's mating up properly. I would smear some marine grease on my surfaces before mating everything up. When you only have 2 screws to tighten a fixture, you're going to invert the saw so that the muffler rests nice and easily on that exhaust flange, and the flange is dead horizontal because the cylinder is cocked backwards if you take a look at it. That's why the exhaust port protrudes at an angle. So you would invert your saw, put the muffler on it, put the heat shield on it, put the grunt gasket down. The grunt gasket, you would dog out the holes, because you're not relying on them for their threads, just for centering the grunt gasket. So you don't want to dog it out too much, just get rid of the threads so that the screw can go through it and just hold it in place so it doesn't wobble. You're going to use, soft gaskets like the lead types that they give you, or tiger patch type stuff, or you can cut your own. I thought my camera angle would show that, but I have some cheapy type soft gaskets up here. You can use a razor blade or anything, and that way you can have your grunt gasket touching the back of your muffler, and you can use one that comes to such a fine point on its outer edge that it's almost like a sharp edge, and you make your flange so that it's kind of poking into it a little bit, and you'll get very tight sealing. And as I mentioned in another video, I don't even have a right angle grinder. I use for 660s. You can get into those transfers without one. I'm not going to show my own porting work because anyone who ports knows exactly what I mean about what kind of can of worms that opens. But anyone who ports also knows that you can absolutely get a straight shaft die grinder into the uppers of a 660 jug. They're gigantic. It's very easy. You just take 100mm Dremel and rotary bits, and you cut down the shaft a little, and voila. But you don't even really need to do that. But I don't want to digress into porting. So a couple more considerations on mufflers. Heat, like I said, spreading it with the grunt gasket is a very important step. So is putting up a heat shield. Another thing though, you see all of this gray here? That's MotoSeal. painted on, you would be very, very, very surprised and impressed with the fact that you can paint the stuff on and it just adheres. It does not peel. It'll discolor a little bit. It'll yellow a little bit at the spots where the muffler is really hot on it, but it's amazing how well it holds up. I can't recommend it highly enough. I put it on the inside face of the plastic muffler covers on my climb saws. I like playing with my 660s because I consider this one of the best platforms of all, and certainly one of the easiest, most universal types of platforms. However, I don't use a 660 1/10 as often as I use a climb saw. I use my 2511, my little Echo 2511 more than anything. And before that, my 355T. But once I got the 2511, it's hard to use anything else. At any rate, one other huge consideration for mufflers is their exits. Now, we all know that when you get a muffler, or I'm so sorry, exits are the final point, and there's one thing I want to address before that. Yes, the grunt gasket, if it's tapered properly, it is going to significantly reduce, maybe even almost eliminate the returning pulse from the acoustic or sonic reverberations of that exhaust pulse coming into the muffler. However, we can also further deaden or at least slow down and diffuse, because spread out that pulse, that sonic return pulse. And that would be achieved by means of something that most people will immediately shy at upon thinking of it, which is a baffle plate. Now, that's because any baffle plate that you've seen is almost certainly just inside of an OEM muffler, and it's going to be restrictive, just like the OEM exits. You, of course, would need to modify an OEM perforation baffle. My 2511T muffler video shows doing just that. That's how I would consider the proper way to do a 2511 muffler. But putting in a baffle like that, it does what? It breaks up that sonic pulse that goes into the front. It turns it from one giant pulse into, dozens. And now they're bouncing around the front. Half of them are bouncing around the front. Some of it gets bounced back by the plate. It's all kinds of turbulence, which is what we want, because that's slowing and spreading, diffusing that return pulse. The final consideration is exit hole size. Everyone talks about 58 to 62% size holes. That's the ratio that you use on an expansion chamber muffler exhaust system. And in that context, you want more bleed-off resistance because you care more about your muffler's effects, because you're utilizing the sonic effects. We are not. That's why we're able to see people just blindly drill into their muffler and still see some positive gains in most cases, because the cooling and the increased throughput are more than enough to negate the atmospheric dilution of the charge that's seen with these, ham-handed drilling straight through the baffle, right? Putting a big hole, or actually the more common example I know is a 660 muffler, just putting the holes on the front. If you have a baffle wall there, that's one thing, because that's going to slow the pulse. But if you don't, everyone knows. You gotta look at Dino Joe's videos, the muffler shootout. Check on OPE forums. Check Scott Kuntz's material, Tree Monkey, his porting series. It is very well known that you do not put exit holes, additional exits on the front of an MS660 muffler. However, that's because it's shooting that strong exhaust pulse right at the front wall. So of course, if you have holes there, it's just going to have more atmospheric mixture in that can. And when the pressure in the can has reached its max and then starts to subside, a little bit of atmosphere will get mixed with the charge spill out. So I hope I was able to explain that properly, but that's prevented in large part by having a longer tube there, by spreading the return pulse with baffles. That's why if you look at any modern muffler, it's going to have a baffle plate. It's going to have it separating one. It's going to have a two-part design that spreads it so that it's making longer paths and everything. That's all for purposes of diffusing the sonic wave. And yes, that is a noise reduction thing, because the sonic wave makes noise as much as it plugs. But like I said, we don't have the length to work with to calculate plugging. So, and we can't get rid of a return pulse. So all we can do is try to homogenize it and lessen it. Lessening it with these and homogenizing it with baffles. Anyways, I'm very eager for anyone's thoughts. Thanks for watching. It's very appreciated. If you did watch, I hope you enjoyed, and if so, please thumbs up and subscribe or any of those supportive buttons. And I thank you for getting through it if you did watch.